Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Okay, I'm gonna try to make this quick. You know how I am about my camera angle. Try to make this quick before I go to bed right quick. Um, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna try to make this quick. Still talking about staying in your lane. Um, but tonight we're gonna talk about communication, okay? Staying in your lanes. Hello, luminescence. Tonight we're going to talk about staying in your lane with these undefined lines, right? Remember, we've been talking about undefined lines in relationships, not just with your significant other, but with family, friends, co-workers, any type of relationship where you have where you come in contact with another person and you tend to cross boundaries or meet boundaries. That's what we're talking about. So, quickly, I hope we're going to talk about communication. Okay, so the idea of staying in your lane, these undefined lines. Undefined lines are basically boundaries, right? Boundaries we either set that have been worn down over time and not reestablished, or boundaries that's never been established in the relationships we have with our family, friends, loved ones, co-workers, whomever we have any type of relationship with. We need boundaries. And the idea of staying in your lane is knowing your place in that relationship and knowing that offense happens. Okay, it does. It happens. So when you are offended, it's learning how to deal with the offense and communicate that offense clearly and precisely to the point where people understand the boundary, which is important. And when they've crossed the boundary, right, we don't want to let those boundaries keep getting worn down once they're set. If you have a boundary established in your relationship, whether it's with your family, your friends, your significant other, your children, your co-workers, your boss, anyone you deal with, boundaries can be worn down over time when we don't reestablish them because of intimidation, because of fear of how the other person might respond, because we just simply don't know how to communicate that the boundaries have been overstepped, and so they get worn down over time. And we don't reestablish them most of the time because we simply don't know how to communicate the fact that the boundary has been crossed, or maybe the boundary has been crossed and we don't, because of maybe the first time it was crossed, the response that we get, hello, thanks for joining. Maybe the first time it's been crossed, the response that we got the first time makes us a little cautious about communicating that boundary, the fact that that boundary has been crossed again. So we're a little apprehensive about communicating or reestablishing that boundary, but it's necessary, okay? It's necessary to make sure we maintain boundaries so that the line is not undefined. People don't keep crossing our boundaries, don't keep hurting us or offending us, and we keep having to forgive or figure out ways to maintain these relationships when we're the one dealing with the offense because someone has crossed into our boundaries. Okay, so tonight we're talking about being courageous enough to communicate the fact that someone has crossed your boundaries, okay? Someone has come into your lane and has caused you to be uncomfortable. Now, a couple nights ago, we talked about how that coming to your lane can cause external damage. And I'll go over those quickly. The external damage that can be caused, first of all, it can cause you some anxiety, or it can cause you to lose focus on what you're doing. And just imagine driving in a traffic lane and someone's getting close to you. It causes you to take your focus off what you're looking forward, and check them, right? So you're trying to make sure they don't get too close, so they don't come into your lane across that boundary, and it causes you to lose focus. That's the external, one of the external causes that it has when those boundaries are crossed. These are undefined lines or boundaries where people cross or begin to cross into our lanes. The next one is the little dent or the bump or the scratch or the squirt, the minor abrasion that comes, that heals quickly, but the scar is still there. And in the sense of the person, that boundary being crossed hurt you. It hurt, okay? Not to the point where you couldn't get over it and be like, you know what, I'm over that. I don't hold anything against you, but I am going to be a little more cautious around you. And that hurt may leave a scar. And I told the story about when I was a young girl trying to ride a bike with no hands and stop with no hands. Did not work out so good for me, but I still have the scars on my elbow. Though it caused no internal damage, it didn't hurt any of my internal organs. It didn't cause any major bruising, but it did leave external scars. Those, every time I see them, or even my children touch them, they're like, what's that on your arm? They're scars from me making a decision. But those scars are the same way when people cross boundaries with us, and it hurts. We could just be honest about, people hurt us. Words hurt, okay? Sticks and stones do break your bones, but guess what? Words can hurt you to your core, okay? So let's not keep passing on that lie, okay? Anyway, the next thing, let me just make sure I clarify that point. Those external boundaries are scars that we may carry for life. Even though they're healed, when we look at them, we remember how we got them. And we also remember that makes us more cautious when doing that thing again. Like that situation with the bike, guess what? I never tried that again, okay? Other than the fact I did in front of a whole bunch of kids, people, long story, I didn't do it again. So that's another cause of crossing boundaries. It's external damage that can be caused. And then the last point I made about the external damage was it can cause a major dent or a major hurt where there has to be separation. And when you think about your car, right, if you have a major accident, though the engine's not hurt, there's no other internal damage that affects the mobility of the car other than it looks ugly on the outside because of the dent. You have to separate from that car for a while to get it repaired, right? And the original parts are usually not replaced, right? They bring in new parts. Say you have a front end dent, they get you a new bumper, right? Or get you a new side, wherever that part of your car has been hit. They replace that part. Same in relationships. That part may be replaced. You may never have that part of your relationship the same again. You might be able to get over it, get through it, but it may not be the same. So those are the three external causes of those undefined lines being crossed, or those undefined lines or boundaries being worn down and run over so many times that we allow these things, sorry, I heard a noise, to happen in our life. Make sure my door is locked. To happen in our life, and we don't correct them, we feel apprehensive about them, or whatever reason these things hurt us, but they don't cause any internal damage or lasting internal damage, other than we're more cautious about the person that we're with or the person that we are dealing with. Again, that third point with external damage, you have to separate. Now, you might not talk to that person for a while. You might have to take yourself out of that situation for a while to heal or to repair the damage that's been done before you can be back in their presence, or before you can reconnect with them. Whatever the case may be, the external damage can be repaired, but it doesn't cause internal damage. We'll get to that internal thing later, but I really want to talk about this communication thing right quick before I go to bed. But communication is so key when dealing with people. Even though it's hard sometimes to communicate your feelings and thoughts to people, it's necessary. But it's necessary to sit down and think through, how am I going to communicate with this person? How am I going to talk to this person about this to lessen the offense? Guess what? Sometimes absolutely nothing you can do to lessen the offense, because people are going to get offended because there's insecurities, like I've said before in other periscopes. There are insecurities, there's hurts, there's always this wall of defense, right? When you ask somebody or say to someone, can we talk? Immediately the wall goes up. What did I do mentally? Or what do you want to talk about now? What's going on? There's a defensive response, like put up your dukes. Hi, Yvonne. Thanks for joining. There's always when you start, I'm talking about trying to get this communication thing going. But when you tell someone, hi, it's good to see you this morning. When you tell someone or ask someone for a moment of their time to clarify or reestablish those undefined lines, or establish the fact that somebody has crossed a boundary, sometimes people will immediately put up a defense. It's not like, okay, because their head's turning and trying to figure out, did I do something? Did I say something? Did somebody lie on me? The wheels in their heads are turning, trying to figure out what the conversation is going to be about to prepare an answer. Isn't that crazy? We do that. We do that all the time. I do it. Unknowingly, we put up a defense in our... It's good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. We have these times when someone tells us they want to talk to us, we immediately start trying to figure out what it's about so we can have our defense ready, right? Like we're going to court and we want to defend something we may or may not have done. Isn't that crazy? Instead of saying okay and just leaving it alone because they know what they want to talk about and you don't, we immediately want to defend ourselves no matter what it is. Isn't that crazy? But we do it. So when talking to someone about boundaries, there's going to be people who, we're already going to have our defense up. Like, what is it? And they're trying to figure out how to answer before you even ask the question. So to lessen this, start off by just warming up the conversation, just talk about the day or how things are going, or what I usually do if I have gotten offense, if I have been offended, or if I feel like I've offended someone, then I'll just say hello. Hey, look, can we just have this little talk? And, you want to sweeten it, because in your mind, you're still wondering, how are they going to respond? And that makes you a little nervous. That's why communication is a courageous thing, because we simply don't know how. We always are worried about the response we're going to get, and we just don't know how to push forward and talk through. So just, sometimes you just got to go in head first and deal with it. But sometimes, just lead up to it without beating around the bush, because there's already that anxiety in the other person. We're trying to figure out what's going on. But sometimes it is best to just go ahead and say, hey, you remember that conversation we were having today about whatever, our feet? I always mess with my daughter about how big her feet are. If she comes to me and say, Mom, you remember the conversation we was having today about, our feet? Okay, suspicious. You want to know, what did I do? It's that defense we put up. It's like we ready to box. If they say the wrong thing, we're ready to box, no matter what, because we want to defend ourselves. But, my daughter, if she comes to me and says, Mom, we were talking about feet earlier today, and when you said I had club feet or my feet were ugly, that kind of hurt my feelings, and it made me feel bad about myself. And then you can go from there with the conversation without an accusation, because people hate to be accused of stuff, right? I know I do. Instead of making it like you did this to me, in a hurtful way, or in a way that will cause even more defense, like just saying, this is how I felt about it, and I'm just coming to you to let you know that hurt my feelings. And even though we were joking, inside my feelings were hurt. So, next time we're talking, or if we can never have this conversation about my feet again, I would appreciate it. Because you don't, one thing when you're talking to someone, you don't want to tell them what to do. Because remember, we're already in a defensive position, right? So telling someone what to do may make them even more defensive. So we don't even want to go there with saying, don't do that. You can ask. Sometimes you got to be more direct depending on what it is and what the offense is. But when you put it in a question form, it's like you're giving them the option to make the choice, and giving them say, hey, they get to think about it on their own and come up with a decision on their own without you telling them what to do. Because people really don't like that sometimes. So it's like, can you or will you consider not talking about my feet this way? Or will you consider the fact that hurts my feelings when we talk about this? And if we can never have this conversation again, it will really make me feel good. Instead of saying, I don't want to talk about this again, so let's just not bring it up. Okay, you see the difference in how that was communicated. Not everyone would talk like that, but it's important how you present the material. I'll say it like that. If someone has crossed your boundary, right, and they've done it in a way where they feel like they had a right to do it, because some people just feel like they can talk to you any kind of way. Let's just be real about that. People feel like they can talk to you a certain way just because of who you are. Whether it's in a workplace, whether it's in a relationship, even your family members may feel like they can talk to you a certain kind of way. I have a family member, a female family member, that talks to a particular male family member of mine very harshly when he has something to drink. Now, these are two adults, and he's an adult, she's an adult. She is not his mother. She's just a family member, and for some reason she feels like she can tell him what to do. And I'm like, no ma'am, no, he is an adult. And the fact that you don't like his behavior, what you sense is a certain type of behavior when he has a drink, that is his business. What you can do is remove yourself from the situation, but you trying to tell him what to do as a grown man agitates the problem in you, because you have a problem. He don't. The problem he has is you trying to tell him what to do as an adult. So we don't want to do that type of thing. That's a true story, no lie. I ain't gonna say who it is in my family, but I'm sure they can figure it out. But the fact that we feel like people feel like they can overstep those boundaries, and it's okay for whatever reason. I have no idea why this female thinks that she can tell this adult male. When I say adult male, he's over 50 years old, and so is she. They're not married. They are family members. I'll put it like that. They're family members. They're not married, and they're not in a relationship. So they're just family members. We'll say cousins. They're cousins. And the one feel like they can tell the other what to do. But the point is, people will overstep those boundaries. They will cross those boundaries intentionally until you put them in check. Now, if they choose not to receive the, hey, I don't like it when you talk to me like this. So if you have a problem with me at this certain time, you're welcome to remove yourself from the situation. But as an adult, these are my boundaries. I make my own choices. I choose to do this for me and for my life. You don't have a right or the authority to tell me what I can and cannot do. Even in relationships, there are boundaries. If two adults, we're talking about adults, children in relationships. I ain't even gonna go there. But as two adults, remember the idea of staying in your lane. Two people cannot drive in the same lane, even though you may be going in the same direction. Hopefully, if you're in a relationship, you go in the same direction, but you are individuals. You have your own individual lane. The only way you can be in the same lane is one is the lead and one follows. Someone has to be in the front, someone has to be in the back. But if you're riding side by side, there are boundaries. And even if you are one ahead of the other, there's certain amount of, even though when you're driving, there's no line to say stay this much. There's a line according to law, that one car space. So there, you still have to maintain space, because if you get too close, what can happen? External damage. Or even if you get too close too fast, that external and internal damage. Okay? So in relationships, be mindful that you are two individuals. You come from two individual backgrounds. Your thought process is different. You may want one thing, the other person may want another. There's got to be communication to say, hey, and you got to learn how to stand up for yourself. That's why it's courageous communication. You have to have the courage to say, hey, this is not what I want in my life right now. Now, we can either work this out together, or we'll have to figure out something different, because this is an area of disagreement and we're not going in the same direction on this topic. So you have to say, you have crossed the boundaries, my boundaries in this area. As an adult, I get to make choices for my own life. You may have some type of influence, but I ultimately get to make the choice for my life. Because you just remember, when you allow other people to make choices for your life, remember, it's your life. Are they living your life out for you? Are they going to suffer or deal with the consequences of you allowing them to make the choice for your life? Now, as a parent, I get to make choices for my children for now. Sometimes my choices are not necessarily correct. Hey, as a parent, things happen. It happens, but I take on that responsibility now. But as they get older, I can only make suggestions to them where, hey, dear, have you considered this? And remember, we don't tell our children what to do, especially our grown children. I had to learn that, because I wouldn't always tell my son what to do, but he's an adult. I have to remember that. I always see him as my baby boy. But anyway, as when your children get older, or your family members, or whoever it is you're in a relationship gets older, remember they're an adult. You can make suggestions, but trying to tell an adult what to do is you're crossing the boundaries, okay? You're crossing those undefined lines that maybe they have not even set at the beginning of a relationship or throughout the relationship to let you know, hey, you're crossing this boundary, because one, like I said before, the reaction to you saying you crossed this boundary caused you to be apprehensive now about saying it again, or you just let it slide. So now they think that's normal behavior between the two of you. And it's not, because you're getting offended or you're getting hurt and they're just going about their business, They don't know that they're hurting you, perhaps, or they don't know that they're offending you. And they might, but because you have not communicated that to them, they keep doing it. Therefore, that line that may have been established or may not is worn down if it has, or if it's not been established, it's continuously being crossed because it's not set in their mind. Even though mentally in yours it is, you have not communicated that to them. So they're going to continue to cross that line. And they're going to continue to hurt you until you say out of your mouth, until you get the courage to say, listen, what you said or what you did offended me, or it hurt me, or it made me feel some type of way, and I would like to discuss that with you. Remember, this may cause the boxing gloves to come out, and they may be in a defensive position. Because remember, they're trying to think of an answer to come back with. They're either going to try to justify or maybe clarify or whatever it is. They're trying to think ahead of you and give an answer before the questions or the comments are even made. I guess as humans, we do that. Excuse me. So in that aspect, remember not to say, don't do this, unless that boundary has been crossed so many times to the point where you've communicated the fact that, excuse me, you communicate You've communicated the fact that this line has been crossed or this boundary has been crossed. They refuse to respect that. And now you got to say, look, you crossed the line. Don't do it again, or there's going to be consequences and repercussions. Okay? So we have to communicate. We have to let people know that boundaries are necessary in relationships if we're going to have healthy relationships. Healthy relationships. We need healthy relationships to be able to communicate with one another, to be able to, whenever there's offense, to say, hey, that hurt me, that offended me, whatever it is, because we've got to talk about this internal damage. Because internal damage, and let me just go into it briefly. When these lines have been caused, when these boundaries have been crossed, and when the boundaries have been crossed, and it causes internal damage. Now, sometimes, and this happened to me actually when I first moved here, I got hit from behind. I was at a stoplight. This van just come up and just bam, hit me from the back. Now, there was no real or major external damage, just a little bump. But the engine, everything in the front of the car shifted because of the impact. So the engine and some other parts in the front were affected by that. I didn't know that immediately, but because of the external damage was minimal, but the internal damage was much deeper. So when people cross boundaries, there may be that external hurt where we be like, it may appear to be, the external damage may not be as bad, but internally we're hurt. And when we're hurt, we tend to hurt other people because that hurt turns to anger, okay? And anger turns to bitterness, and you get mean and hateful and resentment, and you carry that not just towards that person, but someone else may say something to you or sound like that person or remind you of that person, and it will trigger that anger and cause you to speak or talk to them a certain way. So internally, we can be damaged and not realize it, and just not understand that is what happened to us until we say, hey, something's wrong here. This is not a normal response for me, or I didn't intend to, this wasn't always this way. Because when you think about relationships, when you first start out, most of the time that bickering or that disagreement or those boundaries that are constantly being crossed are usually not crossed. Maybe in today's relationships, I don't know. It's been a while. I probably need to talk to some women and men about that, and I will. But those boundaries being crossed, right? So, what was that? Okay, the internal damage. Even though it may seem minimal, the internal damage is deep, and you have to realize, hey, this situation hurt me, and guess what happens? You have to get it repaired, usually with some new parts, right? Something has to be replaced. What was once there is gone. Is no longer usable. It is busted, disgusted, and out of commission, okay? No one can use it. It's going to the scrap metal yard. And that's how it is in our relationships. This part of our relationship has just been damaged to the point that something has to replace it. When I say something, you have to rebuild it. Like an engine. I think an engine can be rebuilt. People who work on cars, engines can be rebuilt, right? That part has to be rebuilt or reestablished to the point where the trust has returned, the love has returned, the respect has returned. But a lot of times, if you don't rebuild it, or if it can be repaired, some things cannot be repaired. In the sense that hurt, we say that, oh, there's nothing that is impossible, right? And that's true. But in some relationships, the hurt is so deep, and some people just don't get over it, right? They carry that hurt around because, one, they may not realize the extent of the hurt. because the external damage was minimal, right? But it's there, and it causes them to, if that damage is unrepairable, right, you carry that into the next relationship should you go in one. So now you're hurt. That person may say or do something that triggers, they may cross a boundary, that triggers you to respond in a negative way, and so on and so forth. So being brave enough or courageous enough to have communication about the boundaries that have been crossed, that have been infiltrated, that have been trampled on, that have been just disrespected. I must be tired. Disrespected. We have to communicate. Yes, it will be difficult sometimes, because sometimes you can feel the tension. A lot of times I can, but most of the time that's a whole different story. But you can feel the tension when you're trying to talk to someone. Why? Because that answer before the question is trying to come out, right? The defenses are up. I want you to understand that communication is necessary in your relationships. But so are boundaries, right? Boundaries are extremely important. Boundaries are important. So when those boundaries are crossed, it's important to communicate that to your partner, to your friend, to your parent, to your children, so they understand this is a line that you cannot cross without some type of consequence or some type of reaction from me or some type of infraction. Something's going to happen when you cross this boundary, whether it offends me or whether it hurts me or whether it makes me think negative thoughts about you. Whatever the cause, crossing this boundary causes this to happen. And I prefer, if we're going to stay in this relationship, or if we're going to continue to have this relationship, I need you not to cross those boundaries. I would love it if we can respect those boundaries and we can move on in our relationship. One last thing before I go, I want to talk about the external damage, the internal damage that is totaled, right? The relationship is over. It'll never happen again, okay? So when you think about it in the sense of a car, whenever a boundary is crossed and the impact is so detrimental that the car is total, it's no longer usable, period. Most of the car is unusable. That's when they total it out. They say you can't drive this thing, or the axles are bent or off or broken, the motor is messed up, the engine is messed up. The impact, the intensity of the impact of the boundary being crossed causes total loss. Now, this can be a major separation of when I say major separation, I mean total separation. You're never going to talk to each other again, or the relationship is over. Remember, I'm not just talking about significant other male, female type relationships. I'm talking about with your parents, your friends, your family members, your co-workers, whoever you have relationship with. When there's a total loss, like I said, nothing's impossible, but you have to think about it from the aspect of somebody's not wanted to ever be reconciled. When there's a total loss, the damage is so bad and so deep that nothing's repairable. In the sense of a vehicle, it can never be used again for its intended purpose, right? Somebody may be able to salvage a tire off the right side, or the radio, or a seat belt from the back seat, but the entire car can never be used for its intended purpose, for what you pay for it for, because you have a relationship with your car, right? You're the owner, and it gets you to where you need to go. The same thing in relationships with people. When the impact causes a total loss, we tend to never want to talk, speak to, be around, and the hurt is so deep. It's so hard, it's so painful that it takes time to get over those things. You may need counseling. You may need some spiritual advice, not the right kind of spiritual advice, but you may need to just talk to someone else. Accept that other person. You don't want to see that person who caused that impact, right? And matter of fact, you might just want to hurt them in the same manner. You know, remember that song "I Bust the Windows Out Your Car" by Jasmine Sullivan several years ago? She bust the windows out because that impact hurt her deeply, and she wanted the revenge. That can be a consequence of the impact, but also loss of life. Someone can lose their life. You know, when you think about a car being total, it's going to the junkyard. It's never going to be used again. We have to be careful when we're dealing with one another, okay? Very careful. We have to be careful with dealing with one another. But communication is necessary. Think about what you're going to say before you say it. You know, you can anticipate what the other person is going to say, but you'll never know for sure unless they are a very repetitive person, and you do know them to the point where this is probably all they're going to say because you've been around them for a point. But still, if you know that, you have to try to find another avenue to get past that type of answer. And remember, don't tell someone what to do unless they've crossed the boundary to a point where you have to do that. There are times when you have to tell somebody, you've crossed my boundary, stay out of my space, or else. There are times for that. But most of the time, you want to resolve the conflict without creating more offense. It's not always going to be possible, but you want to do that. Once you communicate the boundary has been crossed, they know it. You don't let them keep doing it. So I'm going to leave you guys with that because I can feel myself in my eyes, getting sleepy. I got to teach tomorrow. I got so many things to do tomorrow, but I love you all. I enjoy doing this, you know, I do. But thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate you. Women, can I tell you, you're beautiful? May I tell you that you're smart? It would be my pleasure to tell you that you are creative. I would just love to be able to articulate how intelligent you are. Did you know that you are the seed bearers in the earth? Yep, you are. You're the seed bearers, and guess what? We need you. We need you because you bring forth the seed into the earth. Yep, you're just that special. Did you know that? Oh, but now you do. Men, oh men, did you know that you're the seed planters of the earth? Did you know that the generations come from you? Every seed is passed down from you from generation to generation. Huge responsibility, right? I know. But guess what? We need you. Yeah, we need you. You are handsome. You're intelligent. You're creative. You are engineering. You are talented. You're strong. You're wise. And we need you. Yeah, we need you. Can't do this thing without you. So I want you all to have a wonderful night, morning. Yes, have a wonderful morning. Enjoy your week. Know that you are loved, you're thought about, you're wanted, and you are needed. I love you much.